Hello, my name is Emily Glover, and my presentation is about the criteria for the first Martian colonists and/or explorers. During this presentation, I will address the requirements for Mars 1 that Mars 1 has been using for its selection process, as well as outline more criteria that should be considered when selecting the astronauts, such as psychological requirements or extent of knowledge. The astronaut selection process for the first colonists and/or first explorers of Mars has already begun. Mars 1 has completed several phases of their selection process, and therefore they already have guidelines for what they believe to be essential qualities for an explorer of Mars to have. And they claim that the astronauts should be resilient, adaptable, curious, able to trust, and creative. The first characteristic, resiliency, is essential because being the first people on Mars, the team has to work calmly and quickly together no matter what obstacle they are facing. While the astronauts are completing these tasks, they are expected to never question the reason for their action. This level of trust and determination ensures that the job gets done efficiently. Building off resiliency is essential that the astronaut not only trusts his superior but also himself and his team. In addition, the astronaut should be able to use his experiences from his past to help gauge who or what he trusts in. As he does this, he should not be influenced by the outside world, but be able to come up with his own decision of where his trust lies. Once again, there is going to be a team of explorers on Mars, not just an individual. So it is imperative that every member respects each other enough to listen to all the options and choose the best one in each situation. Adaptability is key in this teamwork of this kind. The crew also needs to actually want to seek the answer to the question, but why? Their goal should always be to learn completely from every question they ask and convey their knowledge in a way that is informative to the public and or other researchers who are wanting their data. Lastly, Mars 1 wants their astronauts to be willing to embrace various methods of problem solving as well as silliness. Mars 1 understands that they are sending these explorers up in close quarters, so the team needs to be able to have fun with one another, which includes avoiding conflicts and finding creative sources of entertainment. However, is this the ideal selection process, or are there more options to explore? Chris Chambers, a professor of cognitive neuroscience, claims that Mars 1 does not say why these particular traits are the most important, how they will be measured, or how the standards for selection will be set. One of the main concerns that Chambers has for the colonists is isolation. He asserts that they will be the most isolated humans to have ever lived, because they will only be able to interact instantaneously with their fellow colonists, and only 3 are going to go to Mars to begin with. The colonists can communicate with people from Earth, but there will always be a delay. The psychological impacts of isolation of this magnitude can be severe. Imagine a time where you felt isolated. Were you depressed? Were you homesick? Did you experience another kind of mental illness? Now imagine being one of only 3 people on a planet the size of Earth. How would this experience compare? In addition to feeling isolated, the colonists will also be confined to a limited amount of space. In fact, conditions on Mars are so unsuitable for humans that colonists will spend the majority of their life on Mars in a unit that Chambers describes as the size of 2 average-sized bedrooms. That's the only space they can have. Obviously, this is not ideal. These colonists will never get to experience going outside, feeling the sun on their skin, or get to change locations frequently. This can cause increased feelings of depression, homesickness, and other mental illnesses. So, should we even explore Mars if the colonists could experience such severe mental trauma? And if we do explore Mars, should we consider ways to combat psychological impacts during the selection process? Unfortunately, there is not a clear answer. However, I believe that if we consider psychology alongside Mars 1's requirements, we can justify which astronauts to send to Mars. This might sound like an idealistic statement, but when the Russians were choosing astronauts to go on a long-duration spaceflight on board Shuttle Mir, psychological training and tests were conducted to make sure that they chose the perfect team. One of these methods that they used for training was putting a single astronaut in what was called an isolation chamber where the people could observe the astronaut, but he couldn't see anyone. However, NASA did not use this process. They just took volunteers. So in comparison, NASA learned that psychological training, similar to how the Russians trained, is essential. They also noted that focusing on the group dynamic is crucial, and there should be training geared toward this as well. So far, we have talked about personality and psychological state of the astronauts should have or should be in, but those are not the only aspects we should consider. We also need to have astronauts trained and educated enough to be able to accomplish the goals of Mars 1. These goals include constructing a settlement on Mars, maintaining the technology that they have, and conducting research. Therefore, since the astronauts will be also mostly on their own when they complete these tasks, they should be experts in their field. If they were not, completing these tasks would be nearly impossible. Lastly, the astronauts will be isolated and unable to communicate directly with home, but at the same time they will be constantly monitored by the world, as the colonization of Mars is one of the most exciting events to occur in the 21st century. Originally, the trip was going to be funded by a Korean reality TV show for the astronauts to explore Mars. However, this might not happen, but there will still be coverage of the events. The psychological effects of constantly being recorded could be very severe. So it's vital that we choose astronauts who are comfortable being recorded. In conclusion, the first astronauts to explore or colonize Mars should be resilient, able to trust, adaptable, curious, and creative. However, they should also be psychologically prepared for the isolation and confinement that they will experience on Mars, and they should be psychologically compatible with the rest of the crew, be experts in their field, and comfortable with being recorded.